Good afternoon. Today you will learn about the explosion of an oil depot near the Russian Bryansk, the planned offensive by the Russian army on Kiev, as well as discuss the approval of Western aid and other equally interesting events that occurred on January 19th. Let's start with the situation on the Ukrainian front. Russian troops have practically captured Vesela near Seversk. The village is mostly under Russian control, and fighting is going on for the northern outskirts. Yesterday, the Russian Defense Ministry reported the full capture of the village. Ukrainian authorities did not confirm this. The forces thrown by Russia to storm the village were relatively small, however. The AFU has a sufficient number of personnel only on paper, while in fact, it lacks the necessary number of people. Ukrainian forces in this area had problems with inter-unit cooperation and logistics. In addition, on the eve of the assault, the Russian Federation launched heavy strikes with artillery and FPV drones. Also, the Russians over the past 2 days activated near Avdiivka and advanced. This is reported by military publics. South of Avdiivka, extremely difficult situation. The Russians advanced to the Dacha village of vineyards, as well as increased pressure on the fortification Tsarskaya Okhoda and neighboring positions. North of Avdiivka, Russian forces tried to gain a foothold on the northern outskirts of Stepnoy. The situation there is currently unknown. Supreme Commander-in-Chief Zelensky came and promised at a meeting with the soldiers to solve the problems and provide reinforcements. Unfortunately, even the necessary minimum of reinforcement has not been fulfilled. If this is not done now and the Russians can really get a serious grip on the city, then we will have to throw 10 times as many forces into the battle as in Bakhmut in order to keep the resistance in the city as long as possible, but then the losses will increase by an order of magnitude, and it will be too late, and the responsibility for the failure in Avdiivka will be entirely on Zelensky. Also, Russian military telegram channels believe that their command focused near Avdiivka on mopping up the Dacha sector and cutting gray zones. The American Institute for the Study of War also writes about the Russian Federation's advance southwest of Avdiivka. Russian publics write, among other things, about their advance from the direction of Kamenka to the beginning of Kolosova and Levanevsky streets. More telegram channels report about the advance of the Russians in the area of Svetovo. They repulsed a number of positions near Orlianka, and east of Tabievka broke through the positions of one of the brigades of the Thero defense. Russian units have moved beyond the railroad and advanced up to half a kilometer to the west, taking under fire control the R07 highway, which leads from Svetovo to Kupiansk. The Institute also reports about the advance of the Russian Federation near Bakhmut. At the AFU bridgehead in Krinky and Kherson region, the situation is not as colorful as they paint it. The Russians are advancing with infantry and are killing our logistics as much as possible. Meanwhile, the actions of Ukrainian units in the border regions of the Russian Federation have once again intensified. The Russian Volunteer Corps, fighting on the side of Ukraine, and Russian publics reported an incident in the Suzumsky district of the Bryansk region of the Russian Federation, which borders the Chernihiv region of Ukraine. It is reported that a group from Ukraine attacked the Russian Defense Ministry's Ural. They write about the dead and wounded immediately after the attack. The DRG allegedly retreated. At the same time, judging by the information of the Ukrainian command, the Russians in the regions north of Ukraine are strengthening their positions. The Russian Federation keeps a group of 20,000 military personnel near Ukraine's northern border, who are being rearmed with the latest or modernized weapons. By comparison, the cordon with Belarus is covered by only 1,800 military personnel. By the way, the Financial Times wrote that the Russian Federation may plan a new offensive against Kiev in the summer. The goal will be a complete seizure of several regions, including Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. However, as we have already written, at this stage and with the current balance of forces, wherever the RF advances, there can be no quick breakthrough. There will be the same battles as now near Avdiivka, where they can fight for one village or landing for months. A different scenario is possible only if either the offensive capabilities of the Russian Federation sharply increase or the combat effectiveness of the AFU sharply decreases. In connection with the latter risk, it is worth paying attention to the reasons for the current problems near Avdiivka and Vesela, which are mentioned by Ukrainian analysts. Among them, one common one can be singled out: lack of personnel. The fact that there is a problem with this is recognized by the military themselves, including the AFU command. However, current examples show that it has already begun to directly affect the situation at the front. At the same time, the law on mobilization, which, according to the author's idea, was supposed to intensify the process of replenishing the army, has been sent for revision, and, to all appearances, it will not be adopted before February. Whether the AFU will be able to solve the problem with the shortage of personnel at the front in the coming months is one of the key issues that will determine the course of the war. Another event is connected with the Bryansk region. A Ukrainian drone dropped explosives on an oil depot in the town of Klintsy, where 4 fuel tanks caught fire. A fire train was brought in to extinguish the fire, and dozens of residents were evacuated from surrounding houses. Discussion of a possible war in Ukraine has resumed among Western officials, experts, and the media. The chairman of NATO's military committee, Rob Bauer, emphasized that the situation is at a stalemate and one should not expect miracles in the near future. Bauer also expressed concern about Russia's growing missile capabilities, enhanced by supplies from DPRK and possibly Iran. He also noted the successful development of artillery and tank production in Russia, in response to these challenges. Ukraine is shifting to an active defense strategy, focusing on holding positions, identifying weaknesses, and employing long-range strikes. This will allow Ukraine to strengthen its forces this year and prepare for a possible counteroffensive in 2025. The West supports this strategy, focusing on holding territory, strengthening positions, and increasing supplies and forces in the coming months. However, according to analysts, a deft defense without local counterattacks could cede the initiative to Russia and allow Putin to demonstrate Ukraine's inability to win the war. Discontent among Ukrainians is growing, and polls point to possible cracks in the unity evident at the start of the conflict. There are also emerging difficulties with mobilization in the country. Western support is becoming a key factor for Ukraine, but even with possible Western assistance, including the signing of a White House agreement with Congress, Ukraine will probably not be able to regain all the territory it has lost. Professor Bryansk suggests that to achieve some sort of victory, Ukraine needs to survive the current year and prepare for a counteroffensive in 2025, assuming full Western support. Again, in the West, there are claims of a possible direct confrontation with Russia. German Defense Minister, Boris Pistorius, expressed the opinion of German experts about a possible Russian attack on NATO countries in 5 to 8 years. He emphasized that threats from the Kremlin come almost daily, most recently to friends in the Baltic states. The minister emphasized the need for readiness of the German armed forces for a possible war. It also became known that the Baltic states plan to build 600 bunkers and a defense line on the border with Russia in the coming years. Most of them will be located in the southeast of Estonia, and possibly near Lake Päisi. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania have signed an agreement to jointly use HIMARS and Latvia's Lielvard airbase for air defense. NATO plans to hold the largest exercise involving some 90,000 military personnel, including the Baltics, this year. Talks about an inevitable war with Russia are becoming increasingly relevant, especially in the context of the current conflict in Ukraine. Importantly, these discussions raise questions about the seriousness of the prospect of defeating Russia in Ukraine, as well as the extent of Western support for Kiev. Some analysts believe that talk of an impending war may be an attempt to convince society to increase military spending and invest in the defense industrial complex. Thanks to everyone who watched this video. If you want to stay up to date and get the latest news, subscribe to our channel and click on the bell not to miss new releases.